Beyond the labels we wear, underneath the fear and competing ideologies, we are all looking for the light to bring dignity, understanding, and redemption where there's been pain and confusion. Welcome to Brave Nation with me, Leigh Sloan. Let's pursue the wisdom and courage we need to create lasting reform right here, right now, starting with you and me. Well, welcome, Brave Nation. This is an exciting interview. This is not the first time. She is not a first-time guest to the podcast today. I'm honored here to welcome Shelley Hughes. She is a former senator, our state senator, and she is a current candidate for Alaska governor. And like I said, it's probably the second time at least she's been on our podcast. And in spirit of full disclosure, Shelley Hughes is my favorite pick for governor. And she has been not only a strong supporter of policies that I value, things like school choice. We know now we have many candidates on the ballot and in this thing called a jungle primary that we have here in Alaska. We have this thing called ranked choice voting. So we have a lot of candidates, and so many of these people I know personally. I have a lot of respect for these people. But I chose Shelley because of what she's demonstrated over her years of public service. Not only does she really closely align with my political values and what I would vote for, but she also aligns with how I would like my representatives to navigate the political landscape in a way that I believe is most effective. So welcome to Brave Nation, Shelley. Can you give
Thank
us,
you, Leigh.
yeah, can you give us a little bit more of your background for those who have never met you?
Well, I was born in Ohio and came up 50 years ago to Alaska as a teenager. Have lived all over the state, which is unique. Pretty much every region from Southeast Tuna, Western Alaska, Bethel, above the Arctic Circle, Fort Yukon in Fairbanks, down on the Kenai Peninsula in Seward, and have been now in Palmer in the Mat-Su for since 1990. Raised four children. I have 12 grandchildren and hoping my grandchildren will be quiet because I've got some here at the house. Um, yeah, love family. I spent 30 years in the private sector and raising my family. That was paramount to me to be able to be the best mother I could be for my children. And that investment, Leigh, was well worth it. My kids are grounded. They have strong faith. They have strong conservative principles, beautiful families. I did experience a loss recently, and you know, it's been tough. My husband died on May 23rd, and I am definitely having some tender and hard moments with that, especially home alone at night, early in the morning.
Mm.
But I will say God's given me tremendous strength as I'm out and about, and I am back on the campaign trail. Took a couple weeks off, had family here. My campaign team kept things going and waiting to see what I decide. And I knew without a shadow of doubt, without one shadow of a doubt, that I needed to be back on the campaign trail because I knew that's where my husband Rock would want me.
Mm.
He was the one that got me involved in all of this. Many years ago, as a young man, he served in Vietnam as a combat medic, and
Mhm.
he saw a lot of trauma. He had people die in his arms. He saved lives. And when he came back to this country, he was literally spit on in the San Francisco airport. And he knew something was off in this country as far as where our nation was going. Something happened in the 60s, in the 70s. We seemed to be losing our moral compass a bit.
Mhm.
And he knew that the Judeo-Christian values upon which our nation founded were the right way to go. And so he came engaged, followed politics, became a news junkie.
Mhm.
And when I married him, as a young wife, I respected what he's gone to. And so it became dinner table conversation. And I became more educated on things, got involved, and actually stepped up then to run to serve in the House. And, before I did, I made that prayerful decision, family decision. And at first, he was hesitant because he didn't want me open to attacks.
Mhm.
But as time went by and it was getting time to go file, something funny happened. He became very sure I should run, and I got cold feet, Leigh. I
Hmm.
started, that negative
For governor,
self-talk.
right? When you were
No,
running
no,
for,
no. This
oh,
was running for House, so this was
okay.
a dozen year plus years ago.
Okay.
So I got cold feet and I thought, what on earth am I doing? I've never even served on a city council, that negative self-talk. I feel inadequate, ill-equipped, all that.
Hmm.
And Rock put his hands on my shoulders and he looked me in the eye and he said, Shelley, God has created you for this. He's given you the gifts and the strengths and the ability, and Alaska needs you. And I never looked back from that
Hmm.
point. He was the wind beneath my wings. He was my biggest fan. I even have a funny, I don't know if it was I think it was a Valentine's or birthday card where he signed it, love you, your most loyal constituent or something like that.
Hmm.
So he would want me back, and that's what I'm doing because there's nothing more that he would want than for me to run this race hard and well and to win it and save the next generation from a mess and help get this state on track. So here I am.
Yeah, I can relate so much to what you're talking about as a stay-at-home mom, for years, and I was homeschooling my kids and just having my husband be more the political person, I guess. And he got really passionate about it to where he actually ran for state house that time, and then we just got kind of immersed in this political world, and I'm looking around going, I feel like I don't know enough. I feel like I don't, I'm not qualified enough, but I had certain skills and even just a bent toward working with people and things like that that
Mhm.
he didn't have, or he didn't have the patience for it as much. Although I think he could still be great if he ran again sometime. But and so we all have our part to play, and I think it's really important to see somebody like you who spent a lot of time just focusing on your family and being a person, and that real people can run, and we should be getting in there. The people who maybe don't have all those the nefarious intent to for themselves, those are the people who it's most scary a lot of times to run. But the fact that you were willing to be brave and to step out there says a lot. So I can really relate to that. And it's sometimes you think, even with your age and everything, getting in there later in life. I think you're inspiring to a lot of women that say, you can raise a family, you can do all this stuff, and then you can also run for governor. And
Yeah.
if
And
when the time's right.
the life experience that you learn along the way, it's really valuable. And as long as you're willing to jump in and just be bold and learn,
Yeah.
you can do it. And that's what I did. I feel like I have a good handle. I'm not an expert on every issue, but I'm
Hmm.
knowledgeable about a lot of things. And
Hmm.
the good Lord wired my brain to be good at strategizing, especially when you hit a brick wall. What can you do
Right.
to re-navigate? And so that's what I did. I worked, sometimes I was in the minority, sometimes I was in the majority, but I
Right.
could still get major items through and across the finish line,
Mhm.
working across the aisle. But when I did it, I always stuck to my values. There's so much you can build consensus on, and so much is based on relationships and trust. And
Mhm.
maintaining that was important to me. And, to this day, I'm welcome in legislators' offices, and they were always welcome in mine.
Right.
And they have to know that you keep your word too. That's important. Even
Right.
when you disagree, if you're trustworthy, there's amazing things what you can do when you work together.
Yeah. And you'll always hear me talking about the dangers what I call toxic tribalism. You could call it hyper partisanism or whatever you call it, where it becomes not good for the people when we only look to our tribes and sticking with the people that we have the same label with. And a good example of that to me is here in Anchorage, where our former mayor had put up this idea to solve homelessness or to at least help the problem, that he was going to build a navigation center. And it was just the worst idea to everybody because the assembly wasn't politically aligned with him. And so they shot it down every turn. We weren't able to build it. And now, lo and behold, the new mayor is saying, "Hey, I have this great idea. Let's build a navigation center." And it's like, oh wow, yeah, that's a great idea, because the assembly is aligned politically. And it's just too bad, that we can't solve problems and look at things with, not with the lens of the tribalism that we have over it, or who's on what team.
Right. There's a time and season, right? There's a time to stand strong and stand firm
Yep.
on principle, but there's a wisdom that you need to have in order to know when it's time to sit down at the table
Hmm.
and build consensus. And that takes some trial and error and learning. And I'm not perfect, but I feel like I have learned to do that.
Hmm.
And yeah, and also when you think about it, when we just hang out with people that agree with us, we're not really learning anything, right? It's an
Right.
echo chamber. And it's
Right.
good to be strengthened and reinforced by those
Right.
that are in agreement. But we shouldn't fear having conversations with those that disagree with us because I learn more in those settings. And it's always fascinating. You can pick out the things like, whoa, I wouldn't go there. But there are many things that do not malalign with my principles and values. And it's like, well, we could work on that together, right?
Right.
I've enjoyed, for instance, working on food security and agriculture. And that's something that a lot of people in the state, as we've traveled around, a lot of people are really interested in that. And I am looking forward as next governor getting things done on that front because I think you think back even in the Old Testament, right? Prepare for the famine coming. There are certain things government does they shouldn't have their hand in, but there are other things that are appropriate. And I
Yeah.
think preparing for a time where there could be a scarcity, the Seattle port shuts down, something like that. We as a state government would have a role, and I'm thrilled in
Mhm.
that regard to have Lieutenant Governor running mate retired General Blake Geddes
Mhm.
because he worked in the military, in the active duty, and then in the Air National Guard on emergency and disaster preparedness and relief kind of things. So he's going to be great on that front. So I'm
Mhm.
looking forward to advancing that for one of many things
Yeah.
that we're prioritizing. We're prioritizing achieving low cost energy, number one, because that's kind of the
Mhm.
foundation for much of what we need to do.
Right.
And yeah, so I'll let you ask the questions, though. I don't
Yeah.
know where
Yeah.
you want this podcast to go.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I was thinking about how some people are great at campaigning and other people are great at leading. And sometimes it's not the same person, right? So the skills that get you there won't necessarily make you a good leader and keep you there, and maybe that's part of the problem with what's happened on our legislature. The people that end up getting there are not great at what they do all the time. So how do you differentiate that? Like, how do you come to terms with that? And how do you teach people to be a better leader?
I believe you need to be consistent in the same person in the both roles. I try to be sincere, authentic, transparent, and explain policy and not use one line slogan kind of things. And I do that too when I'm serving. So there's an understanding, and I'm communicating with the public, bringing the public and understanding we're a constitutional republic. So we don't just blurt out what we're going to do and what we believe, but we have to listen. Well,
Mm.
the people are our boss. We're a government of, for, and by the people. So when I'm out and about, whether I'm in office or campaigning, I'm always asking people, I want to know what their concerns are, but I want to know what their good ideas are for solving problems in the state because I can't be an expert on everything. They've got boots on the ground in different areas. So that's I do that both in office and out of office. And I think being the same person is part of being a good leader. And I will often ask people I speak with, especially out on the campaign trail. I raise my hand and I say, how many of you have ever been disappointed by a politician? Everybody in the room raises their hand, right? Because we all have. And then you ask the question, why is that? And there's usually it's one of two reasons. It's because they've said one thing when they've campaigned, when they've gotten in the office,
Right.
they've morphed into something else and they're not sticking to their word. That's one
Mm.
reason. The other reason you'll see is because someone will say something and maybe have good intentions, but they get into the office and they can't get anything done. They do hit a brick wall. They don't know how to navigate
Mhm.
and they just don't know, maybe have the relationship skills. They don't know how to be effective with the legislative body, whether it's a city council,
Mhm.
an assembly, a state legislature, So that there's you have to know how to navigate once you get in, and you have to stick to your word. And I tell folks you don't have that risk with me. I've been gone through 6 elections. I have even had two, a three-way race where one's a Democrat, one's an independent, and I'll still get in the upper 70s of the votes. And, yeah, my area leans red, but I also have Palmer in my district, which is our blue pocket here
Mhm,
in Matsu, and I have Democrats that support me.
mhm,
I had some. We've got one that's going to be endorsing us soon. And I had some come when I first announced, and they said, "You listen to us. You
mhm.
work well with us. We don't agree with everything. You don't agree with everything with us. But we believe you have the best intent and you work hard for all Alaskans." So that's who I
Yeah.
am.
And I think being on the legislature, as long as you have, you can get a lot of flack for what has gone wrong with the legislature. And you have such a record that, yeah, people can pick things apart, but people who don't have that background don't, also aren't standing up to that scrutiny either. You know what I mean? So,
Right. Right, because there's a public record when you've just, I said 30 years in the private sector and raising a family, but I also have now a 12 plus year public record. And some people will tout, well, these daggone legislators, these
yeah.
people, these career politicians, whatever. I don't figure it a career. I spent far more time outside the public sector, so I don't consider it. I'm just offering my skill set to help the state, basically. And if Alaska's wants me to do that, I'm there. But when you criticize, those that have experience, I think it's rather foolish. And I think voters, because somebody who's just coming in from the private sector, first of all, their record isn't transparent, right? We don't know, have they been fired? We don't know, the kind of things they've done.
Mhm.
Have they run an organization to the ground, or have they built up an organization? We don't
Right.
necessarily know their private record history, but with public service, you do. So I
Hmm.
think that actually is helpful to the public, not to mention the knowledge and the relationships and all of that. And I ask the question, you look at any elected official that comes out of the private sector that has been successful, it's often someone who has served multiple times and they get more successful. Our president is, you could definitely say that he got more done in his second term, even in the first year of his second term, than he did in his whole entire first term, especially for Alaska. And so, whether you look at Ronald Reagan, he served as governor and then 2 terms as president. It was his second term in president. He had a lot under his belt by then, very
Hmm.
experienced. So experience is valuable and should not be discounted.
Right. Well, I want to talk about the polls for a little bit here because, we're the fact that we have ranked choice voting is it's this crazy jungle primary that we have to choose one and then so the polling and people who are saying, oh, this poll or that poll, and they're trying to say you should vote for this person based on their chance of winning. Speak to that. What do you think about all of that?
First of all, there's a large block that's undecided, more than usual because there's so many candidates and people
Hmm.
are kind of confused and they're kind of waiting to see, who sort of filters out. So you have a larger undecided block. So polls right now are pretty meaningless. And I will say some of them are push polls. They're coming across, for instance, they will list the Democrats and independents and a couple of the Republicans that the Democrats would feel like they could easily beat. And then they'll put everybody else under a line that says other that you got to click on and type their name. So
Mm,
that's kind of funny. This was not a scientific poll, but it was on X within the last week or so, where somebody put one out and they listed, I don't remember which candidates, but it did not list me. It was like out of 4 candidates or something. Who do you want to be our next governor?
hmm.
And I wasn't even listed, and I came in third place. And 2 that were listed came in first and
Wow.
second.
That says a
But
lot. Yeah.
it says a lot. And I was talking to a longtime Politico, doing this for 40 years or something, the fellow, and I gave him some anecdotal information. He's one of the ones that said, ignore everything right now because it's going to shift tremendously. But I said, I don't know if this happens. I said, I've never heard of it because typically primary voters, Leigh, are usually very loyal. So once they pick
Right.
their candidate, they stick to them and they will go to the mat. If there's some scandal about that candidate, they will defend them to the T, right? And you don't see people switching. But in the last couple of weeks, we have gotten reports from Fairbanks that people are switching from two of the Republican candidates to our ticket. We had people show up at an event in Kenai where there were 20 people with buttons, for a certain candidate. And they said, we just want to hear you.
Hmm.
We're supporting this candidate. And by the end of the event and the questions and answers, they were removing those buttons, putting on our buttons, and
Wow.
walking away with yard signs. So that's anecdotal,
Yeah.
but it tells me that there is a lot of shifting that's going to happen.
Right.
And we've been building steady upward momentum, just staying the course. We've managed to stay out of the crossfires. And um, I don't know if you know the term dark horse. I think it's generational, maybe if it's even regional. But I
Hmm.
mentioned it to the younger generation. They did not know what I was talking about. I said, I think we're going to be the dark horse. And the dark horse, of course, is that horse that comes out of the gate. No one's betting on it. Nobody thinks it's
Right.
going to win. And it just steadily moves forward and then it lunges forward at the end and wins.
Right.
And we've got a strategy for that, and that's what we're working
Hmm.
on. And we'll see how it all comes out.
Yeah.
But I think it's way too early to predict. And I think a lot of the polls out there are push polls trying to promote certain candidates.
Hmm.
Even the left is trying to promote certain candidates on the right that they want to win,
Mm.
and that kind of thing. And so people are kind of
Yeah.
picking and choosing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you have to be really pragmatic in some ways when it comes to who you're voting, who you're choosing, because in one way, you do have to think about who has a chance.
Right.
But in another way, you can't overly put too much stock in what everyone is telling you about who's the most popular because that may not be accurate. So you kind of have to mix a little bit of your convictions with strategy. It's kind of like,
Absolutely.
yeah, what I always talk about being brave and being wise at the same time. Like if we can keep those things in mind when we vote for someone, I think especially in this primary because we only get one pick, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think both on both sides of the ticket right now, you have some that are trending as the most popular, and I think and the data actually shows they can't win. On the left, you have someone who's very, very extreme, and I think would be a hard bite at the apple for Alaskans overall. They're just too far to the left. So I think, that person could surge ahead, but they would lose. On the right, we have the same thing, people that are out there and their names are out there, they're popular, whatever. The data shows also they can't win, or baggage skeletons coming out could
Hmm.
drag them down. And that's the one thing about our ticket. Blake and I, we're not perfect. We're all human and we all have our flaws, but we don't have skeletons and baggage and we don't have high negatives.
Hmm.
And, when I was looking for a lieutenant governor running mate, I was looking for someone. Of course, that's one of you're vetting different
Hmm.
people, but I wanted somebody who was a person of character and high integrity
Hmm.
and very competent because we're going to use our lieutenant governor in a manner that's different, but it's totally allowable under the Constitution and statute. So he will be helping lead efforts because there's so much to do. I'd get spread too thin. And if you've got somebody strong and competent and capable, why would I shove them down the hall? Why would I not let them help?
Hmm. Yeah.
And so he's eager to help the state. He wouldn't have stepped up if he was just going to warm a seat.
Yeah.
So we're excited to have, it's basically everybody's getting a better bang
Hmm.
for their vote because instead of getting one person working on their behalf, they're going to get two going
Hmm.
full throttle. So it's a good deal for voters.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I've noticed about your campaign is, and just in dealing with the people that you're working with, is that you seem to have a culture of honor and a culture, not in a lot of campaigns that I've been, maybe semi-involved with, it's like there's this franticness or there's this like pressure that you have to do or whatever. But with yours, it's more like, let's just follow through on what we say we're going to do. Let's just be upfront with each other. Let's communicate well. And I think that's just a good culture to bring to the government. That's very rare to have it at a governmental level. So thank you for that. But I want to ask you something. What has been your most difficult test of leadership as you've been serving over these many years?
I think when you get in, and especially when people have different ideas and you do have the different parties, I was prepared to get pushed back from the other side of the aisle and attacked even.
Hmm.
But what I wasn't prepared for was that to come from my side of the aisle to the extent, and it almost comes more from my side of the aisle than it does from the other side. And so that was unexpected. I've learned that that's a real thing and you have to deal with it.
Hmm.
And I don't know when I started this, but it's something that's been a guide in my life. I think since I was a young woman getting involved with all kinds of things in the community and the church is, that people aren't perfect and sometimes they will disappoint you. Sometimes they will say negative things about you.
Hmm.
And I have learned instead of getting bitter, because that's our natural reaction, is I have to, it's almost mechanical, is to ask God, give me your eyes for this person.
Hmm.
And it's a prayer and it's just words and mechanical initially, but I keep praying that daily until I actually do have a compassion for that person and I don't have bitterness.
Hmm.
And that is so important in politics because the one moment they might be awful,
Hmm.
6 months later, you need to work together. And if you
Yep.
can have a forgiving nature and work with that person, it's going to be better for the people that you serve. So
Hmm.
I think that is something I had to develop over time, but it did come as a surprise when it was coming from my own side.
Yeah. And I think whether you're a person that says you're a person of faith or not, you're going to benefit from a redemptive mindset like that. It makes
Yes.
the world go round. The golden rule makes the world go round. And I think people, even if they don't acknowledge faith or anything like that, they would like to work with a person like that.
Yeah, it's a matter of saying you understanding that this person has a different perspective,
Hmm.
that something really rough in their life might be happening right now, or they had a background experience that made them think that way, so it's just being understanding and giving people grace, I guess. Yeah, that is true.
It is difficult when you agree with people on a lot of things, but they don't act that way. They don't give you the benefit of the doubt. They don't treat you with dignity, and that's really unfortunate sometimes. I see
I,
that happening all the time.
I wanted to say something because you were talking about a culture of
Mhm.
honor
Yeah.
in our campaign organization, and I am richly blessed by the robust campaign. It's all Alaskans, and it's different. And I've actually had other candidates, a couple of them actually, say they're jealous of how large our organization. We built it from the ground up to carry us all the way through to November. We have a policy team that is preparing our action plan of how we're going to lead from day one, week one. What are we going to work on initially? What has to go through the legislature? All those things, feasible steps to help our state. But regional chairs throughout the state. So we're very grassroots, where other campaigns tend to pay several outside consultants high fees. So they might, the first 20,000 or so of what they bring in as far as fundraising is going to pay someone from outside the state. So we're all volunteer, but we still have some incredible expertise because we have a lot of our people on our team have actually worked statewide campaigns at the upper management level. So we have the expertise, but they're doing it because they believe in our ticket and they believe in our state. So when you see fundraising numbers, you're going to see a difference. But I want to remind people that, Sarah Palin beat Frank Murkowski a fraction of the money.
Mhm.
Dunleavy, what he raised, we far exceeded that when he became governor. So it's
Mhm.
not always money. The
Mhm.
team is really important. In our case, our team it's got to be worth just, I just throw out there, it's at least worth a $500,000, just the team we have.
Mhm.
And so we have what it takes to get all the way to November.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're still thinking about it and deciding where do you take questions, how can you interact with people?
There's a web form on my alaskansforhughes.com page. That's probably the best because my person that's helping manage that gets it to me and I respond. Social media is interesting. I know people get frustrated. I don't have enough time. Even if I never slept, I could not respond to everything on social media.
Mhm.
And I noticed I just happened to go on there because someone screenshot something. How do you want to address this? And so I went into the live post and the guy kept saying crickets, 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 because all these questions were asked. And it's like, oh, I wish I had enough time because I know the gentleman probably does really want to know. So
Mhm.
using that web form is great.
Mhm.
My cell phone number is out there and people call that. It's pretty easy to Google and find it. It's 907-841-1634. My team's probably not going to be happy that I just said that in this podcast, but I really want to be available. It just gets harder.
Mhm.
My philosophy when I served in the House and the Senate was to have frequent meetings. Someone said I probably broke the number of records of constituent meetings and coffee chats that I had.
Mhm.
And it's going to be harder on a statewide basis, but even when I serve, I'm going to make the point to visit communities and provide some kind of setting to allow that kind of interaction. It won't be as easy, I'll be spread a little thinner, but I still want that input. I want to hear directly from Alaskans.
Yeah, well, that's great. I really appreciate that. So I just want to give you one last chance to say, because our time is getting close. I know you have a lot to do, but just to say what you would like to say to Alaskans about what your priorities are and what you could leave them with.
Well, I think we will be stronger as a state as we work together on these things because some of these things we've been talking about, we didn't actually even talk about the platform. My website is super thorough.
Hmm.
It has more information than any other candidate that's running. And that was after we trimmed about half of it back because my team said it was too verbose. You're giving away too many secrets. Nobody's going to read all that,
Hmm.
but it's still more comprehensive. So you can see where my platform is. But I guess I would say as many of these things we've talked about, Leigh, for decades, and yet we haven't made progress.
Hmm.
And I believe our team, we are equipped to actually make progress and move these things forward and begin to realize we talk about our best days being ahead. It's time to start realizing those best days. And we can, but there's some challenges, but they're not insurmountable. And we've got feasible steps to get us there. And I believe when you look at the different candidates, I'm the best suited to be able to navigate the legislature because that's part of it. I know how to do that. But you also have to have someone whose vision isn't just slogans, but it's actually a practical, pragmatic action plan. And we've got that. So when I hear that our young people are leaving the state, and the state is not affordable. We don't have the housing, grocery prices are too high. We have to get to the root of that. And that's what our action plan is about. Because flash forward in 10 years, if your young people are leaving the state, you are not going to have a vibrant society. Families are important, and we want to support families. We're pro family. And so that's what we're about. We're ready to solve problems and build a stronger state.
And you mentioned a couple of your priorities. One was energy. What were the other ones?
Yeah, it's a portfolio of
Okay.
energy. So not just natural gas,
Hmm.
but a geothermal. Hydro is huge, small modular reactors, and even clean coal technology. The emissions are 90% less than they used to be. And then the other is getting lands into private hands. Less than 1% of Alaska is owned by private individuals. So we're going to dispense state land, not just out in the boonies where you have to have a float plane, but accessible land that can be used for agriculture, timber, smaller plots in and near communities for building houses. The cost of a home, one third of the cost is the land. So if a person can homestead on that, $100 for that property, that's going to reduce the cost of housing. And the third thing is infrastructure. That's both the physical infrastructure that we're overdue. We're a young state and we missed out on Eisenhower's massive highway build out. We've got a lot of infrastructure needs, but it's also the workforce infrastructure, which relates back to education. Our children right now are disadvantaged because our education system is messed up. So we've got to work on that. We've got to get folk ed In our schools, we have to get the working age, able-bodied people off of the welfare programs and give them work training and job opportunities
Mhm.
so that everyone can thrive. So it's a big vision,
Mhm.
but step by step with determination, you can do it. Ask my family if I'm persistent and
Mhm.
determined, and they will tell you yes. That's
Yeah.
that's that's my MO.
Yeah, and I think it's important when you choose a candidate to look at what they're going to do, if you agree with basically what they want to do, but also how they're going to do it. Because when, last time, when Dunleavy came in, we didn't know we were going to have COVID-19, right? We didn't know,
Mhm.
but if you could know how someone is going to um, how they've demonstrated over and over that they've acted in a certain way, then I think that can help us prepare us for what's ahead. So thank you so much for your time coming on here with our Brave Nation family, and we look forward to seeing how this primary shakes up. One thing people are talking about is if like what are we going to do if we have three Republicans and one Democrat? What is your part to play in that?
My commitment, because I believe in the conservative platform, is best for families and best for our economy and best for our future. My commitment is I will do whatever it takes to ensure we don't have a liberal governor because I think that would take us down the tube. I think it would cause a downward economic spiral. So my commitment is do whatever it takes that we will not have a liberal governor. And if that means I'm in the top four and I need to step out, I will. But mathematically, strategically, that's not just a quick thing because if I stayed on, I could say, please vote for the top Republican. If I get off, somebody could move up who would be trying to get the votes for themselves, another Republican. So you can't just make a statement. Anyone that's doing that is either ignorant or they're not being truthful about what they would do. I'm being truthful. I'll do what it takes, and it may mean staying on or it may mean stepping out.
So
But
if
hopefully I'll be the top vote getter. That's what our
yeah.
goal is.
Yeah. So yeah, you're a team player. You're saying, if you need to, if it makes sense strategically that you would get off the ticket. So that makes a lot of sense. We'll have to see what happens. I'm excited to see. And yeah, reach out to anyone you're curious about when it comes to this election. I hope that a lot of you do vote in the primary. We also have to vote, what we're going to be voting on ranked choice voting too in the next one. Not in the primary, right? But the final election. So
Mhm.
that's something else to consider. Do you like this way of voting?
I
Or
know it
is
just I know it disenfranchises people. There's a lot of debate right now. I know it was dark money that brought it in, dark money that kept it. It's so funny to basically saying, "Oh, we need to keep it to keep out dark money." Hey, that didn't work, folks.
Mhm.
So I know I have my personal opinions, but I know the voters will ultimately decide on that. And my goal would be that if someone's a minority, someone doesn't have a college education, someone has a different language than English as their first language, that they are still able to vote and will vote. And we've seen that decline. So that's my big concern.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming on and sharing your insights with us, and we look forward to seeing what happens next.
Yeah, thank you, Leigh.